Content projection in Angular is an important topic to learn. Not only it becomes a bit tough, but this also allows you to do a lot of cool things very flexibly within Angular. And that is what I'm going to teach you in this particular video. Hey everyone, my name is Ahsan. I'm a Google developers expert in Angular, and my goal is to level up your skills in Angular in the best ways possible. So by the end of this video, you will learn about the basics of content projection, how to do nested content projection, which I call content reprojection, how to do multi-slot content projection, and looking at a real world example that you can use within your projects as well. So watch till the end and let's get started. So right now we are working with an application that's served on localhost 4200, and you will find the code in the description of this video, and you will also start with the branch that says start here. Now the structure of the app looks like this. We have the app component at top, then we have a bunch of components, but in the app component we are using a dialog component just like this, and the dialog looks like this. When I click this delete button, you can see the dialog heading, the dialog content, and a close me button. Now if you were actually creating a dialog component that you could use throughout your application, you might want this dialog to be dynamic. So you want at least this button to say something like submit or delete based on your use case, and you might also want to change the heading and the dialog content. First of all, we are going to look into how we can actually project a content inside this dialog. Because we have the app component as a parent component and the dialog component as a child component, the easiest way to do this is if I go to my dialog component, I would have to change this particular content. Right now this is hard coded here, which you see right here. So in order for me to change this, what I would do is I would put a ng-content component right here, and just by doing this I am actually able to say I'm going to pass something here, so it doesn't show anything at all. And it makes sense because the dialog content should always be provided by a developer. So I can go to my app component, and here I can start putting some content here. For example, I can say a paragraph tag, and I can say this is the dialog content. If I save this now and if I click delete button again, you can see automatically we have the content being shown right here. And if I inspect it, you can see that this p tag actually ends up being inside this p with the content. So if I go to my dialog component, you can see that this py-4 is the parent of what is being projected. So I could actually go into my app component and remove this p tag completely, and that would mean that I have now just passed a complete text within the dialog. So if I click this and go and inspect this, you can see that we have the py-4 class applied, and inside that we just have a content. Now this means that it's better for my dialog component to not be a p tag but rather be a div which can accept multiple things. So I'm going to go back and put this inside a p tag, and this also means that not only I can pass one paragraph, but I can also pass other elements. For example, I could pass a div, another div, and so on and so forth. So there's no limit of what content I can pass. So for example, here I can say I have an image tag here that I can pass. For example, I'm going to copy my image from here and then paste it right here, and then I'll also add some classes to mask it. So class mask and then mask squircle, and I'm gonna save this. Now if I click the delete button, you can see this nice little image. So we can add a bunch of elements as content right here. What I'm gonna do rather is just add another p tag, and I'll say this is secondary text. I'm just gonna add text gray 500 here, and let's see how the text looks. Now that we have the content in, I also want to change the heading. For example, I'm actually deleting something here, so I want this to say confirm deletion. So what I want here is an h2, and I can say confirm delete here. Now when I open this, you can see that this ends up being in the content instead of the heading place. So what I want to do is in my dialog component, I can put another ng content here, and if I remove this hard-coded dialog heading and put ng content, I actually would want the heading to come here and then the content here. So if I open this now, you can see still we don't have the heading right here, and we still get everything in the content. Now we are actually jumping into the content projection. By default, Angular will project everything into the second ng content. For example, if I just remove this from here, now everything is gonna go inside the heading, and that's how Angular works. So it picks up the last ng content if every ng content is as basic as this, which means that it doesn't have any additional attributes on it, so it will pick the last one. Just like this. Now what I want to say is the heading goes to this place and the content goes to this place. How can I say that? This is where multi-slot content projection comes in, which means that I can specify that the heading should come here. For this, I want to have a selector right here, and the selector can accept all the selectors that components work with. For example, the dialog component right now works with an element selector or a tag selector, but you could also add a class here, for example, app dialog, or an attribute like app dialog, and this would make it work. You might have seen the similar things from Angular, which is ng-for, ng-if. So the same selectors can actually be applied there into ng-content. So here what I can say is, let's say if there was a CSS class, I want to pick that, and that could be dialog heading. So if I do this and if I open this, you will see that still everything comes into the content because I'm selecting in my dialog that there should be a dialog heading somewhere, but my app component does not specify it. So I have to come here into h2 and say class, and here I can say dialog heading. Now if I save this and click this again, boom, you can see that confirm delete now shows up in the heading space. And this works with classes, attributes, as I mentioned, and you can also use other selectors as well. However, this is not the best practice because you never know when someone is going to change some CSS classes and they won't even know that this affects actually the content being projected in the dialog component. So this is very risky. What is a better way of doing it could be an attribute that you might want to use. So if you go and say dialog heading just like this, then that would mean that I would have to go into my app component, because you can see now it doesn't work. So I have to go to app component, and inside here, instead of the class dialog heading, I would go and say dialog heading, something like this. And I also want to make sure this looks exactly the same. So if I do this now and open it, you can see now this works. But the problem with attributes is also the same as classes. Someone might remove it without actually knowing what this does. And you also have a possibility of naming conflicts with third-party libraries which might be using a dialog or a dialog heading. And we don't want to do that or add additional functionality. So a very common approach to do is slot attribute that you can put here. And here you can say, for example, dialog heading or dialog dash heading, depending on your preference. And I can go here and say here we have slot equals, and I can put in single quotations just like this. Now if I open it, you can see that this works. Now this is a very common approach that is used everywhere. Now if we have a look at this, what's really happening? First of all, we have the heading being projected in the appropriate slot, but everything else actually goes inside the content. And that is because the app component right here has multiple elements which go directly into this content. Now what happens if I want to change the button right here? So I would want to go and say, hey, I want a button that should say confirm, something like this, and should also have some classes. So I can say class button btn primary and just save this. And if I open it, now you'll see that this also becomes a part of the content because we're not really saying anywhere where this button should go. So essentially I should go to my dialog component, and here I want to make sure that this close me, which is right here, is replaced with an ng-content. So I will go here and say, for example, we have an ng-content, and this ng-content has a selector. So I can say select, and here I can say something like slot equals, and I can specify what I want here. So I can say dialog actions, and I'll save this. Now I also want to just comment this out, so I don't want to use this. And now I can use the same name in my app component, and I can go here and create a div that contains all of this. So I can create a div here in case I wanted to provide multiple buttons, and I can say something like slot equals, and here we can say dialog actions, and here I'm gonna just paste my button. If we save this and open this, now you can see the confirm button is being projected in the right place. And if we inspect it, you can see that this dialog actions div is actually inside the model action, which is right here. So we are actually projecting it correctly. Now we can actually get rid of this particular button. And there we have it. We have now multi-slot content projection where two of the slots are defined, where we have the dialog heading and the dialog actions, and everything else basically comes as a content. So if I look into this particular situation here, you can see that we do have content right here. Now the only problem that I have with this approach is that I want things to be very precise. I don't want elements to be just roaming around. So what I want is to also have a wrapper for the dialog content. So I'm going to actually wrap this up into a div, and I want to also define a slot here. So I can say dialog content, and I want to go inside my dialog component and also specify the ng-content here. So I can say select, and here I can define the slot equals, and here we can say dialog content, and I can save this. Now if I try to open the dialog, you can see everything works as it is. But if I try to go to app component and add anything else, for example, I can add another button, click me, and if I save this and open this, you can see that this does not render anywhere. So anything that is not part of a slot does not get rendered, and I think I like this much more. I'm just going to remove this button for now. Now, the next technique we are discussing is called aliasing content projection or content projection aliases. What that means is that instead of my dialog component defining that it's going to expect this particular thing from the component that's using it, we are going to do the other way around. We're going to go to the app component, and here we are going to say, I'm going to pass this h2 as something specific. So it just changed the mindset, and instead of the slot here, we are going to use ng-project-as, which is really specific because this tells also the developer looking at the code that this is going to be used for content projection instead of the slot or any other attribute, because this slot is not really specific to content projection, but we were using this inside the dialog component. So what I can do now is I can replace all these slots with ng-project-as, which also allows me to go to my dialog component now and remove a lot of code from here. So I'm just going to be using this dialog heading right now, and I'm going to update the other two as well. You can see how cleaner this looks already. If I open the dialog component, everything works as expected. Awesome. Now we are moving to one more step. What I want to use instead of this confirm button, I already have a component called dialog auth actions, which has two buttons, confirm and cancel. I want to use this whole thing for my dialog actions. So if I go to my app component, you can see that we are projecting a div as dialog actions, but instead of all of this, I actually want to project the auth dialog actions or the dialog auth actions component. So I can say app dialog auth actions, and I'm going to project this completely. So I'm going to save this, and I'm going to say ng-project-as, and here we can say dialog actions, and we're going to save this. Now if I open this, you can see that already we have the cancel and the confirm buttons from the dialog auth actions component being rendered. If I do cancel, nothing happens. If I do confirm, nothing happens because we have to write some code. So I'm going to go to my app component, and here we are going to listen to an event, which is auth action. And here we are going to call on auth action with the event being passed. And what this does is that if I click delete, click cancel, it closes. But if I click delete and click confirm, it waits for a while and then it closes. Now here we have a situation where the confirm button, when we call it, it essentially makes an API call, a fake API call, so to say, using this API service. And essentially this causes a delay. So we should have a loader being shown right here, and then the dialog should close. So now we have a situation where we want to actually replace this confirm with something else. So what I want to do is I want to go to my dialog auth action, and here I'm going to replace this whole code with a component that I've already created. So we have a component called icon button, and inside the icon button, we already have the ng-content. You can see that we have one ng-content for the text and the other ng-content for an icon. So I also want to have an icon since we have this icon button, and when this API call is happening, I want to show a loader right here. So I'm going to change the icons here as well, which means we are going to project the icon from the app component. So I'm going to go to my dialog auth actions, and I'm going to remove this completely. And now we are going to use app icon button just like this. And when I click it, I want to emit an auth action just like the cancel button. So here you can see that we emit false, but here on click, we are going to say auth action.emit true. And if I do this, then I would actually expect that since I'm using the app icon button right here, an app icon button automatically has the ng-content selector, which is button icon, and it also has a default ng-content. I would imagine that if I'm using the dialog auth component in my app component right here, then I can just go ahead and project something from here. So I could say, for example, confirm, and I'm assuming that this confirm from the app component goes inside here, inside the dialog auth component right here. And from here, it directly goes inside this particular ng-content. If I do this and go to delete, you're going to see that nothing is being projected, not the icon and not the text. And the reason for that is we have the app component and we have the icon button. We do have the ng-content right here, and we're actually trying to do something from the app component to ng-content. And that is, if you see the app component right here, you're seeing that we are using the dialog auth actions and using confirm here, and we are assuming that this confirm goes from the app component directly to the icon button. However, That doesn't work. This is where the content reprojection comes in which case we actually have to first project from the app component to dialog auth actions, and then we have to go from dialog auth actions to the icon button. This is the content reprojection. So what I want to do is for this confirm to actually end up inside here, I want to go to my dialog auth component. In here where I'm using the app icon button, I have to put an ng-content here, which means that my app component right here is actually passing this confirm text, which goes inside the dialog auth actions component, and it is rendered right here. And from here, it is actually going to go inside the icon button component and will be rendered right here. Now, if I save my files and click delete, you can see that we do get the confirm actually being rendered here, which is awesome because we are now able to pass from the app component to dialog auth actions and from here to here, which is reprojecting the content. Now, does that mean I can also go ahead and show a loader as well? Let's try out by putting a span right here with some classes. So we have loading, loading spinner, and loading access. So I'm using Daisy UI. So these are legit classes. If I open this, you can see that we already have the loader. Awesome. But it is not here where it should actually be. So the reality is that this text and this span are both being projected right here in the last ng content. They're not being projected in this one, or the icon should at least be here. So as you can see, the selected here is button icon. What happens if I go here and if I say, hey, I want to do ng-project as, and here I want to say button icon. Now this should solve the problem, right? If I click delete, you can see no, it does not. Saying from the app that I want to project in a particular slot inside the ng content does not directly work because I have to first project with the slot name into dialog auth actions and then do the same forward. So that means I have to go to my dialog auth actions component, and here where we have this ng content for the text which is being shown right here, I also want to have another ng content for the icon. So for this one, what I want to do is I want to create another ng content in this middle layer, and this one needs to say that it's going to select the button icon from the app component. So this dialog auth actions needs to select the button icon from the app, and it then needs to project the button icon to the icon button component. So this also needs to have an ng project as button icon. And now that when we save this and click delete, yay, let's go. You can see that we have the icon in the right place. And if I remove this ng project as, you can imagine what would happen. So if I click this, you can see that it goes to the wrong place. So not only the selection is important, but also the projection is important. And this is essentially the gist of content reprojection. Now, of course, I don't really want this loader to be shown all the time. So I want to have some logic around here. So if I go to my app component HTML, you will see that in the TypeScript file, we do have a signal which basically tells us when this loader should be shown. So when the confirming is set to true, only then it should be shown. So what I can do is I can go inside here, and then when we have this particular span, which is the loader, I can put this inside an if condition. So I can say if confirming, only then we have this span being shown. So if I save this now and click delete, you can see that the loader doesn't exist. If I click confirm, it shows the loader, and then it basically hides it. Now, when this is not confirming, I want to show something else. So I'm going to put from hero icons, which is an amazing source of free icons that we can use. I'm just going to copy SVG, and I'm going to use an else block here, and I'm going to put this just like this. Now you can see that I'm using the ng project as button icon here as well. So we have at least one icon being shown all the time. So if I click this, you can see that we have this paper icon. When I click this, you can see it changes to loading and then it closes. Super cool. Now, the last thing that I want to discuss is what would happen if we don't really pass a button at all or no actions at all. I just want to maybe have a dialog that just closes it and shows some information in the meantime. In that particular situation, let's see what happens if I just remove app dialog auth actions, which is being projected as dialog actions, which means we are not providing any dialog actions at all. If I just comment this out, you are going to see that the dialog does not show anything at all, which is not what we want. So we can do a fallback of the ng content and we can go to our dialog component, and inside here where we have this dialog actions, we can actually, instead of just using a self-closing tag, we can expand it, and inside we can provide something that is going to be there if nothing is being provided for dialog actions. So we're just going to provide a div here which has a button, which has classes button and button primary, says close, and on click we use dialog element dot close, and the dialog element is the HTML native dialog element that we have right here. So I can just save this, and if I click delete now, you can see we have the default close button right here. You can also try it and say default close, and if I click and save this, you can see it right here, and if I click this, you can see that the dialog goes away. I'm gonna revert this back to close. And that is pretty much it for this video. I hope you learned a lot of things in this video, and do the usual stuff like, subscribe, all those cool stuff. And if you want to level up your Angular skills, check out the Angular Cookbook 2nd edition, which we just launched in December, and it has been doing pretty well in the Angular community. And we always make sure that this is up to date with the latest Angular version. So it is on Angular 18 right now, and there's a bunch of topics right there that you can learn from, be it component communication, animation, performance optimization, progressive web apps, you name it. And if you're interested in more cool Angular videos, maybe check out this one, and I'll see you in the next one. As always, happy coding.